Hi, welcome to the Dead Prophet. I'm your host, Mike Beckett. It is an honor and privilege to have Dave Helmuth with us today. Dave, you and I met about 20 years ago. If I
That's
did
great.
my calculations right, I had just become an educator out in Lancaster County, and I was working with a Hopewell Church out there in Elverson, and
Hmm.
they had kind of gone through a bit of a transition. They had hired a youth and worship pastor, and kind of as big as they were, realized that a youth pastor also can't be 100% youth and 100% worship pastor. So they were in such a predicament that I remember when we were sitting in the office, it was that the gentleman who had been hired and said, I just can't do this anymore. I don't have time. And then this other girl and myself, and I remember when we were in that office, the pastor saying, none of you can tell anybody in the congregation who's leading which week because people will not come for the one individual. It's like you
Wow.
cannot say because, the reality is you're investing all of your time in youth, that which is it. That's your gifting. And then you're just kind of, well, we'll pick up because you can strum a keys or something. You just pick that up. And worship is a little more than just kind of picking it up. I mean, you can have worship with people who aren't super talented and it be amazing because the heart's in it, the focus is right. But I'll never forget that. And then I think they had brought you in to kind of do some assessment and kind of get an idea of the sound system, get an idea of what things could we do to make the worship experience beneficial for everybody. If I kind of get my facts correct, and then you and I had connected, and I was going around and doing some ministry, and you at that time I think had just founded or started Ad Lib Music, and you were helping coach pastors and worship leaders and building that relationship. And I remember there were a few times I went to a few places that you were in need of for filling at worship, and I know that was a great experience for me over the years. I've just been going through. I know so many people. I want to get in touch with them and have them on the show here. And talk about what God is doing in their life, in and through their ministry. And I think I would say next to being a senior pastor or like a youth pastor, the next crucial component of any church service is the worship that we would define as the musical side of worship. Of
Mhm.
course, most people will know that you live a life of worship, but there's got to be that component that draws you into the presence of God, draws you into that authentic time that you have with God that no one else can do for you, but be done at particular times during your walk and throughout your week. So tell me a little bit about why you started this and what kind of brought that about, and then we'll kind of jump to where you're at today.
Yeah, sure. Well, thanks for inviting me. I'm glad this is working out. So when I started in 1990, I graduated from high school, and my sign of my notifications here. My
That's always
my
fun.
pastor's wife, she had her fourth child, and she was our worship leader. And she said, "Okay, Dave, I'm done. You're now our worship leader." And I just graduated from high school. I'm like 18 years old, don't know what I'm doing. And so I dove in and started leading worship. Always been involved playing drums and then learning guitar and then learning keyboards. And uh, I went through this kind of trial by fire experience. And I was in college at the time studying music, but I had my little group of worship team members. The same five of us for 5 years. Just every week we were all on. We were friends. It was great. We were young. Uh, and then I moved up. I graduated, moved up to Pennsylvania. I was in Texas. Moved up to Pennsylvania and started working at other churches up there. And I was mentored by some people, and I thought, man, wouldn't it be amazing if there's so many people out there like me who are just in there trying to figure it out, week in and week out, have a heart for the Lord, a heart to serve, have some talent musically. Wouldn't it be amazing if I could make a living somehow by helping these people? Because I know that if I was on staff at a church full time, like that's your world, that's your focus. And so what can I do to help people? because I've always had a heart for the region. You know, it's always been part of mine from my dad. My dad was very much that way. He was a pastor, a church planner, and always very regional minded. Always loved building relationships to strengthen the church, and so that heart got into me as well. So I started this worship coaching thing called Ad Lib that was designed to primarily mentor and coach leaders, worship leaders, so that they could work with their teams and develop their teams. And that was the beginning of it. That was 2002, and I did that for a number of years on my own, part time. You know, when we met, I was still working other jobs. I don't know if I was on staff at Petra at the time, but I was doing other things, and it wasn't until the end of 2008 that I kind of launched into it full time. Did it on my own for a few years, and then 2013 started bringing coaches in, and we've kind of built a team of coaches in 3 states now, and I lead it from Costa Rica.
That's amazing. That's amazing. And from the tropics, from beautiful, beautiful area of the world for sure.
Yeah,
I was jealous when you showed me that walk path through those trees.
yeah,
Like I
yeah.
would
Well,
love
and
to have that walk path.
it is lovely, and it's I shouldn't say this, but it's 55 to 75 year round here. So that's the range of temperature. It's like kind of the perfect zone. We're up in the mountains, up at 5,000 feet, so it's
Wow.
a great place. Anyway,
Wow.
so I lead it
Yeah.
from here.
That's great. That's great. So, how many people do you have that are part of this team?
There's 9 coaches right now.
Okay.
We have a couple in Texas, a couple in Colorado, and a couple in Pennsylvania.
Great, great. And
So
what role do they play? So when you're talking about a coach, I know this is I don't want to say it's the new buzzword, but it seems to be across like universities. I work for universities, and now they're starting to hire academic coaches, and then they want you to be trained at a specific place in the country. You know, you go here and you're trained, and
get
then
your
you get your
certification.
certificate saying that you now are a coach. What do you mean by coach? What do these coaches kind of do in the
Yeah.
midst of this ministry?
So it's a little bit of a hybrid. So my understanding of the differentiating factor of a coach versus a mentor versus a trainer is somebody who asks questions, who helps people learn by observing things, by noticing things. We often will say that we are just a mirror. We're helping you see yourself as the way the rest of the world sees you, as a leader, as a team. And so there's a lot of, we're not like, we're the world's best fill in the blank. We're just not you. And so when we come and we watch what you do, we listen to you talk, we notice things from the outside and ask questions about that. And that's a lot of the process. And each coach obviously has a different background, different strengths. There's a couple of guys that are strictly audio in their focus, so they do training in that realm. Um, but it's our general approach is this: we walk in, observe something happening, and begin to ask the question: if this leader, if this team, if this church was the best version of itself, was the healthiest expression of who they are, what would that look like? And then what's the gap between where they are now and where they could be? And how do we help support that and strengthen that? There's not one right way of doing stuff. There's not even the best way of doing XYZ. It's really discerning and deciding, okay, what would you look like if you were the best you, if you were the
Hmm.
best version of yourself?
Yeah,
So we've
that's great.
developed we can talk about this later, but a kind of a development system called the 5 Vaders that addresses that idea. But um, as far as the coaching piece goes, that's our perspective: is if you were healthy, what would you look like?
Yeah, yeah, that's great. That's great. Well, you leading into it, what are those five development things that you do?
Yeah, so we believe that it's called the 5 Faders, and we believe that every worship leader and really every worship team member, even a church has a fader to it, but everybody is motivated by one of 5 things, and it's not kind of a hat that you wear. It's not a personality trait. It is really a motivation. It's the why are you doing what you're doing. So 5 things: you're an artist, you're a shepherd, you're a priest, you're an educator, or you're a producer. The artists are those who notice nuance, who think in terms of detail. They're very focused on the music, how things sound, how things look. That's the artist. The priest, I'm sorry, the shepherd is wants to notice the individual. They are considering everybody as an individual, not just my team, but Joe and Nancy and Fred. How are they doing? What's going on in the interplay between them? How are we doing relationally as a team? They were just focused on that, and so that's what they build. The shepherd is the very vertical, connected one who's thinking about how does what we do create a space where we can meet with God in worship. That's the vertical focus. The educator just wants everybody to be well equipped. That's the focus, and so they're always thinking about ways, they're explaining things, helping people be understand their role, and being a mentor, a trainer as they're leading. And the last one is the producer, which is kind of the planner, the organizer, maybe a type A. They love to exceed the usual limits. You know, we all have limits in our services, but I bet you I can plan something so we can exceed those limits and make something really transcendent and beautiful. So a couple of really important things about the faders and the concept. One is that if you don't know who you are and if you don't know what motivates you, there's no way I can ever be the best version of that.
Right.
You know, if I go through life looking at my team and it's a bunch of shepherds, but I'm an artist, I'm thinking, man, I'm just dysfunctional. Like, I care about the music and nobody else does. Like, what's going on here? So I've got to know who I am, first of all, to be the best version of myself. And the reality is that unlike a personality test that says, well, I'll get to that in a second. So a critical element in knowing who you are, for instance, the artist. You can be a healthy artist or you can be an unhealthy artist. And it's a very easy caricature. If you've ever been involved in church music, you know the unhealthy artist. Very hard to work with.
Faces are flashing in front of my head right
exactly.
now.
That's very true.
And I'm sure they are for you.
They're perfectionists.
Yeah.
You'll have a 4-hour rehearsal to go over 3 songs, you know. They're just not fun to work with. You feel like, there's this weight and this load, and it's not great.
Yeah.
You don't feel built up. You don't feel valued. You feel like you're always messing up. You're walking on eggshells. It's just not good. And you can compare that with the idea of a craftsman. And I love the idea of a craftsman, because a craftsman is somebody who takes raw materials and creates something that's useful and beautiful. Like there used to be the last apartment we lived in, they had remodeled the whole thing. It was a wooden house. And so there was this literally like a pile that was like, I don't know, 5 feet high by like 20 feet long, 10 feet wide of just wood, junk, trash. But I made so many pieces of furniture out of that for our house, because there was like no furniture in the house and no kitchen countertops or anything. And so I just built stuff from the trash. And that's what a craftsman does. You know, it takes an unprepared musician, an undeveloped musician. You show up, you get together, and I'm going to teach you how to play this part on the drums to make this song work for us. I'm going to show you some ideas here on the keyboard that you can do that's not going to get in the way, but that's going to complement what we're doing. Even though you don't know what to do, I'm a craftsman. It's okay, because I really care what we sound like. I really think we can make something beautiful and something that the congregation will be drawn in by, that we can meet the Lord with.
Yeah.
So a healthy versus unhealthy is night and day. It's the same motivation. I want the same thing, but I get at it from 2 different ways. So if I don't know who I am, I can't be healthy. Yeah. The other thing is that, man, if you've ever been around, if you're ever, let's say you're a priest who just loves to linger and soak and be in God's presence and kind of go off the written page, improvise. And your drummer is like, dude, I notated my music. I listened to the recording and I wrote down the drum parts. Yeah. And this ending has a 4-bar thing, and this is how it goes. Don't mess that up. And we can be like, I hate you. You're just killing the spirit, man. And he's like, you're just flaky. And so understanding that my team has, you know, and the 5 faders, each one of the faders brings something beautiful to the team, but we don't often recognize that. And so So knowing that my drummer is a producer, I'm like, this is the value you bring. Okay, I can begin to honor you, and as a team, we can begin to appreciate who we are. And then
Yep.
the last thing is that these are called the five faders, and I'm thinking faders on a soundboard.
Yeah.
That means they go
That's what
up and
came to my
down,
mind, turning them up, down,
turn them
balancing
up
it
and
out.
down.
Yeah.
I've got to learn at any given moment, love requires from me, I need to turn that fader up or down because I might be the priest, right? And I want to sing spontaneously and I want to leave everybody in the dust because I don't care. Except for love requires me to not do that. And I'm gonna pull that fader down, the priest fader down, and I might be an educator fader for a moment. I might just say something to the congregation, guys, pull out your Bibles and open to Psalm 95. And if you don't have anything else to sing, just read through this. But we're going to sing to the Lord a little bit here, and it's probably going to feel weird to you. There's a little shepherd fade to come in. It might feel weird, but we're going to just take 30 seconds and do this because I want to teach you. I want you to begin to walk into this. And I might not. I would never naturally need to do that as a priest fader because I just dive into it. What do I
Yeah.
care?
Yeah.
But I can't because love requires it of me. So
Yeah.
it's a system that's designed to identify who you are, help you become the best version of that, and then help you learn to turn things up or down so that things are appropriately balanced.
That's neat that you say that because I never forget there was a time, and when I say I was involved, I was entrenched in charismatic movement beyond beyond the fringes. you know, but I remember we had gone to a church and we were in the process where we went from our building to moving to a school. And I'll never forget at that point, worship was timed because we were renting per hour from the building. Uh, you know, so what we had in our luxuries of the building that we were renting from that was our permanent stay until it got bought out, we didn't have that. And I always have experimented sometimes in the midst of worship. When you're crunched for time, all right, these are the songs, the place where we're getting potentially walking into for worship. It's each service. I have three services, and they're slotted per time. Opening song 5 minutes. About 15 to 18 minutes for the set before the sermon. And then the closing one's about 3 to 5 minutes. And some people are like, I can't do that. It's impossible. It's impossible to meet with God in 18 minutes or in 10 minutes. And I'm like, I could prove you wrong. Because
Yeah.
it's the attitude that you go into the worship service with. It's
Mhm.
I the sounds to me like the levels of everybody on the team that would hopefully portray we're here, and in these 18 minutes, in these 12 minutes, in these 5 minutes, we're going to do something that thanks to Christ we can do, and we're going to worship the Lord in his throne room. That kind of idea, and it's great. The other thing that I experimented with one time was I used to hear, well, there's just no anointing in the hymns. We can't do them anymore. I'm thinking, wait, if Casting Crowns can do them and other groups can do them and they sound pretty good. So I went to a church that I go to every year. They bring me in every year. We're practically like family. And I told Pastor, I said, I'm doing something different this time. He said, what? I said, I'm going to do all the old songs and all hymns. I said, there's two new songs I'm going to do that are newer. I said, but I just want to see something. It's more of a test of my own faith, I think. And I said, I just want to
Mhm.
prove to myself that I don't have to sing the newest song on the radio to be able to experience the presence of God in a worship service. And from the time we strummed that first note to the time we were done, you could feel that God was there with you. You could feel that he was there and receiving the worship as a pleasing worship unto him. And but they're just two examples of some things that I've experienced over my lifetime. That it's a matter of how you approach it, I think, and looking at those different faders and those different types of personalities, if you will, that can exist in a worship team. I just never really kind of thought to look at it through that venue, and I think that's just amazing. And you hit one of the nails on the head. Unless you know who you are, you really can't be healthy for doing
Yeah.
teamwork because your focus is like this all of the time. And you want to
Right.
be able to
Right.
have that focus to where you're moving outside of yourself, looking as the team, and then again, focusing, why are we here? as worshipers. We're here to help lead the congregation into the presence of God, and that's interesting. I had an awesome experience growing up. I went to Bible college. I met my wife there. Of course, I was going to be the next Billy Graham. Uh, I was quickly humbled, but I never started out doing worship. I mean, I led worship when I was going through Bible college. I had a traveling worship team at the college. We did that, kind of worship slash Southern gospel stuff. But it wasn't until we went to a church in Jersey, and their worship leader was stranded on the turnpike, and they're like, "You guys, can you lead worship?" And we're like, "Yeah, we can do some stuff." Yeah, so we did it, and ever since then, it seems like we've always been doing worship. But I had a great mentor. You met, I don't know if you know who Steve Garrett is. Uh,
Oh, yeah.
but he was my mentor when I was in Bible college, and we were going to the church that his family had pioneered there in the Downingtown, Pennsylvania area. He kind of saw that there was a desire to do some worship, and he knew I was not really properly trained piano, but he took the time, and he worked with me and mentored me, and really instilled the heart of the worshiper versus the talent.
Yeah.
God can take the talent of anybody who is willing to have a heart to worship him and turn that totally upside down. Because I, by far, don't think of myself as a gifted musician, but people who have heard us when we've gone out and done worship say different, and it's just me. Um, but I remember him pouring into me and taking the time to walk with me. And in fact, for a period of time, he started with me where I would lead like a verse at worship service, and then I would lead a song. And then it was, "Hey, dude, you're going to lead it all." you know, but it was interesting to see that mentorship. And it sounds to me that's what you guys do. You go in and allow people to kind of take the moment to understand who they are as individuals, who they are in Christ, and then start working on that balance to be able to make the most of a worship service, because it's key. It's key. You really don't want to go up as a pastor and preach a sermon after you maybe have somebody who can't strum to beat with the drum. it, People are having a hard time trying to, they can't get engaged. Um,
Yeah.
so it's nice to kind of see that. Um, what Now you said you have about 9 different coaches in a couple different states. So churches who are like interested in connecting with you and saying, "Hey, Dave, we want to build our worship ministry here. We kind of are at the point where it's growing. We've got people who are involved, but we want to develop it so that the experience that people have when they come into the church is kind of the same experience. You want to be able to make sure, whoever you have worship leading, if you have 5 different worship leaders, you want to try to make sure that every week you have those 5 people. There might be 5 different weeks, it's rotating, but you want to make sure that each and every time someone comes to church and a worship team is on, that everybody has the same opportunity to experience worship in the same kind of manner, if you will, to where they know that when they come to worship, that time that's slotted for worship, they know what to do, kind of idea. You know what I mean? Um, what can you do as far as like pastors coming to you and say, "Hey, Dave, got a church here, running a church. We just need to do something with our worship ministry to bring it to that level." How does all that conversation kind of start? I guess is what I'm saying in a nutshell of walking around the box.
Yeah, well, I mean, it's our approach is super relational.
Mhm.
So it starts with a conversation. We have to get to know you. We have to get to know. I'll ask a lot of questions, because when you say, "I want everybody to have the same experience," it's like, well, they're coming from very different places.
Yeah.
You really, you mean like you don't want it to be Southern gospel one Sunday and rock and roll the other Sunday and old hymns the other Sunday and modern rock the fourth Sunday? Like, what are you saying by you want the same experience? Like, we need to get to know each other. I want to hear some of the things about what is God doing,
Hmm.
where is he leading this
Hmm.
congregation, and then specifically like, help me feel what it feels like to you when, um, rather than a same or different, because different things are going to hit different people differently because
Yep.
they come from a different place. Thank you for the obvious idea.
Yeah, yeah,
Uh,
yeah.
um, but what is it when it falls below this, like, this is not us, or like, this, the mix was just awful, like, because churches never have different mixes from week to week ever. Like, what is it? What does it feel like that's different? Because I'm looking again for what might be the best expression of this church. And I always say, like, it's great, and I think you should be inspired by other churches, other ministries, what they're doing. You should learn from each other. That's great. But be who you are. Be who God made you to be. Like, don't try to copy the church down the street. Why? You're not them.
Yep.
Everybody except for everybody. I will do a terrible job of being anybody else other than myself,
Right.
because that's the way God designed me. So it's the same is true with the church. And I want to find out, from their vision, from their heart, what they're seeing. I want to try to get kind of behind their eyes and say, okay, when it feels like this, what's going on? When it feels like, oh, can we not do this again? What's happening? Is it the way that your leader is leading? Is it the way the band sounds? Is it the song that they chose? Is it the mix? Is it the pizza you had last night? The fight you had with your wife on the way to church? Never happens to pastors, but I've heard of those things.
I've heard those things.
But what is it? Because churches and leaders are great about talking in generalities, and like, that's not super helpful.
Yeah.
I need to know.
Yeah.
It's like you go to your doctor and you're like, yeah, I got some pain. Like, where? Some pain in my body.
Yeah.
Okay. Does it hurt when you do this?
Hmm.
Like, so.
Yeah.
I,
Follow
and,
my
and I,
eyes or follow my
exactly.
finger.
That's what we do as part of our coaching thing, is that it's like, okay, you go in, you assess the issue, you see kind of where are people at, where's the gap, and then what's your RX, what's your
Yep.
prescription, how are we going to move from here to here? Because there's things that we do. There's, like, kind of one-on-one coaching. There's we'll come in and do a rehearsal coaching where we, instead of you trying to create an event that half of your team doesn't show up to, let's just come to a weekly rehearsal and kind of produce it, do like a master class and train you in the moment.
Yeah.
So there's lots of things that we could do. Do we need to come in and model? Would it be helpful for us to lead worship to show the team what it feels like to do something different?
Mhm.
And we need to find that out so that
Yeah.
we can appropriately say, okay, well, this is what we think that it should be. But the heart behind it is just, let's walk together for a bit.
Yeah. How
Let's get to
often do
know
you
each
find
other.
how often do you find when you get involved in worship teams and start working with them that the worship leaders or the church wants to, like, emulate the song? We're going to do this the way Carrie Job did it, and it's going to have the same impact. And if we don't do it the way Carrie Job did it, we can't have that impact. Yeah, that's just throwing that out because that's the one that comes to mind. But do you see that a lot in the worship ministry, where worship leaders and teams are striving so hard to, I don't want to say be perfect, but they're striving so hard to make it so perfect that it's as tingling as it is when they listen to it on the radio. Is that a challenge that you seem to come across more often than not?
Uh, uh, it, we work with smaller churches, like
Mhm.
under 500,
Mhm.
to call that smaller. Generally, I mean, we've worked with larger churches, but our anywhere from 50 on up to 500.
Yeah.
And so the problem I see more often, we see more often than that, is the team has not learned. And I love the phrase, you have to learn to replicate before you create. Like, your goal is not replication. Cover band is not your goal, but it's an important step to go through so that you can create. Um, Anytime a musician says to me, well, or a team, we're just making it our own. It's like, no, it sucks. It sounds bad. Like,
Yes.
that was so, and that's, I wouldn't say that like that exactly, but
Yeah.
but the idea is, you know, somebody was trained, skilled, developed, produced. They thought a lot about it, and they worked it out this way. So copy that, get that in your fingers, get that in your feel, and then make it your own.
Yeah.
Begin to diverge off of that. It's not, like, why do you want to sound like Carrie Job? Like you're not Carrie Job. You don't carry her anointing.
Hmm.
That was a pun right there. You feel that?
I got it.
Carrie. Okay.
Carry.
Uh,
I'm there.
yeah. Thank you. So why are you trying to be her? There's something that the recording captures. There's something that arrangement captures,
Mhm.
and so like, okay. So here's this is super interesting to me because I'm in Costa Rica, and resources are a lot lower here. Our church that we go to is about 100 people, and which is yeah, it's average to big even for here. But there's always about a dozen people on stage. So the pastor is a musician, he's a worship leader. So he's literally trained everybody on the team, and I love it that this is the way he did it. He started off like, okay, I'm leading worship on guitar, and he's watching the few people that are there. Who's watching me play? Ah, you're interested. I'm going to teach you how to play. Let me switch over to bass. Same thing. Let me switch over to drums. Same thing. Let me switch over to keys. And he just taught everybody how to play.
Wow.
Now, this team, every Sunday it's like 2 electrics, 2 keys, acoustic, drums, bass, and a couple singers. Full team. And they don't walk all over each other. They all play, they replicate well. They play the parts.
Mhm.
And I'm like, and they do some songs that are like a little more like synthy, or like they have a more modern kind of a groove.
Yeah.
And like it's hard sometimes to make those work.
Yeah.
But I'm
But
like,
they started, and then they started making it their own with those synths and kind of adjusting it a little bit.
yeah, yeah. And so this team like pulls these songs off. And I'm like, man, you guys, I'm just impressed.
Hmm.
And then after, a number of months of attending, I'm like, and now they're ready for the Dave sauce. Cause I'm like, I mean, I call this ad lib music for a reason.
Hmm.
Because
Yeah.
that's just my default is like, let's just make it up as we go. Let's do it at liberty here.
Hmm.
Um, and so the first training that I did with the team was like, okay, guys, when we get to the end of this song that we've planned and programmed, follow me. What do we do? Was not on the recording. It's like we just have to go to a place where we can actually communicate and say things that we really mean, not just play a song. So and that's super refreshing to be in that environment rather than just like, you crammed the song into your strumming pattern. That strumming pattern is not what this song
Yeah.
feels like.
Yeah.
And so most people never go through that process of figuring out and making their music fit the music.
Hmm.
And so it's pretty easy to teach to get people to loosen up a little bit and
Yeah.
and create a little bit because you already have everything in your hands.
Hmm.
Um, so I wish I saw more of a. I don't, there's a lot of churches that use loops and tracks, multi tracks.
Yeah.
Um,
I've known some people who've used the Prime and the
yeah,
yep.
yeah, Loop Community,
Yep.
Prime, and Ableton, and Playback. And I've used those, and for different reasons I've used those. And sometimes it feels like, nah, you're cheating. You just sound like the recording. It's like, well, was it helpful to worship, or did it feel like I was playing guitar to a CD, and it was it
Hmm.
stupid?
Yeah.
And our coaches are kind of split on this. And if we get into this discussion, then we go to fists and this is the stupidest thing. How could you even think about doing tracks? It's so dumb. Like,
Yeah. Yeah.
you
Yeah.
know, so, but I don't. It doesn't feel like there's a lot of teams that we've worked with that just replicate stuff,
Hmm.
and it's not effective.
Okay.
Uh,
I remember many years ago we were with um, one of the churches we were with, and when we got there and got on board, one of the pastor had a recommendation that I remember it kind of rippled across some people, and that was like, if you guys are going to do Days of Elijah, if you guys are going to do Goodness of God, if you guys are going to do a song, worship song, no matter which team does it, we would like you to do it the same every time, because it's going to confuse the people when they're in the church service, because when they hear the song, now maybe you add a loop or come back to a chorus another time or so, but you want to do it the same way every time because you want that consistency across the worship team. Now, is that something that you would probably say that's a great idea as a worship team? You really need to have that cohesiveness so that if because the reality would be if I was on a worship team and I was leading that week and I got sick the day before, food poisoning, when I got food poisoning, that's most of us get sick here in the United States because food poisoning. Um, and we had a set ready and everything was loaded. The last thing you want to have to do is go back and redo everything. So if everybody knows the song and they know how it's to be done, would you think that that would be something that would be encouraged to go to first? Or do you think that you're taking that creativity away from everybody by trying to get every song to be done in a similar fashion? What are your thoughts on that? Because I know that that tends to come up a lot of times. When you're at different churches, well, I do it this way. I do the song this way. When you're thinking there and you're listening to yourself, that's not even the beat. You know, uh, what do you mean you do it this way? This is the way it should sound.
Right, right. Well, okay. Again, I want to push for clarity.
Mhm.
So I want you to do the same every time. What does the same mean? Here, the two things that I say are the same. Number one is the melody is the same. The rhythm of the melody, the melody notes, that is the same. Don't change that. Don't do your own version of that. Stop it. It's a different song. The melody must be the same. And the second thing is the way that you play the music has to support the singing, has to support that melody. If the way that the style that you're choosing to play, the way that you're expressing that stuff, even the mix of, if you're lucky enough to have multiple teams with all the same instruments and relatively similar skill sets, like you have a very healthy and very developed worship ministry. Usually it's like,
And
well,
that's
our
an
one bass player,
abnormality, really. And
that's
when we look at worship,
absolutely
it doesn't happen very often.
right, right. So, what is the effect of my bass player on the second team? Not really. He just kind of dings the notes, but doesn't like grab the string and doesn't have that articulation. Doesn't drive the song. The song cannot feel the same way.
Hmm.
It just the way that you're playing that song is not going to be as easy to sing
Hmm.
as the bass player that's driving that part.
Yeah.
So it's a little unrealistic to say it's got to be the same every week.
Hmm.
It's a good goal to shoot for, but I would be very clear in what does the same mean,
Hmm.
because the same melody and make the way that you play it easy to sing that same melody.
Hmm.
And probably by far the number one problem that worship teams have with doing that second part is tempo.
Mm. Yeah.
Because if you don't, you know, I have, tempo is like I always start at this tempo. And why is that? Because the song was written and recorded at that tempo, and it's going to feel different.
Yeah.
Partly because the tempo changes, you'll feel that. But the biggest reason it's going to feel different is that the wrong tempo enables my bad habits.
Hmm.
And
Yeah.
so again, I'm strumming it in a different feel than it should be because I'm going too slow or too fast.
Hmm.
Or it's allowing me to play in a certain way, or the drum beat is either completely different or it just feels different because of the tempo differences. So if you can fix the tempo, which is why, if you can get your team to play with a click, you will go light years ahead.
Hmm.
I believe, because it what it does is that it makes everybody have to agree. We are following this thing here.
Hmm.
Instead of, well, I listen to the drummer and no, I'm actually playing, I'm hearing the bass player. I'm playing, the worship leader is a keyboard player. So I'm listening to the keyboard player. Oh, I'm listening to the singer. No, we're listening to this
Hmm.
right here. This does not change.
Yeah.
And when we agree to that, we can finally lock in place after a season of weeping and gnashing of teeth. Because
Yes.
there's always that.
Oh, there always is. What are
So,
some of the challenges you've seen over the years of doing this when working with churches and coming in? I mean, and maybe we've covered them in kind of what we've talked about already, but Well, if you were to say that the top three challenges that you have seen when trying to help worship teams uh,
Mhm.
kind of walk into their fullness of what they can become as a worship team and be the best version of that church's worship team that they can be, what are a couple of those challenges that you might see that you sit back and you think to yourself, they're not getting it? Because I'm sure in the 20 some years you've probably had one or two of those, maybe a couple, maybe zero after it or two, but one or
Yeah.
two of those over the years that you bat your head and you're thinking, I don't understand. They're just not getting it. And this is the challenge that I have. And what were those challenges like?
Yeah. I mean, the first thing that comes to mind is simply that they didn't ask to bring us in. So whether it's the pastor that brought us in, and the worship leader's like, "Oh, why are you here? Why why do I need to go to this?" Or if the worship leader brings us in, and like the drummer didn't ask us to come in, but the worship leader's like, "Yeah, I brought you in because of the drummer."
Mhm.
Um, Helping people come to a place where they're wanting to engage what we're trying to teach. And so that's we really try to not say we're going to help you be better, but rather if I'm working with a team, I want you to feel more confident and more comfortable, because we know that comfortable, confident people, musicians, are going to play better. If I'm not like, am I getting the right notes? Am I locking? Am I if I'm feeling that way, it's really difficult to make good music.
Yeah.
You just have to be relaxed and enjoy it, and
Mhm.
then it's going to be better. Uh, so we try to work at ways of bringing people around to wanting to grow, because people just don't want to grow. Like I mean, my least favorite person in a church worship team is the bass player that's been the same for 10 years and still is just not very good.
Mhm.
I'm like, that's just bad stewardship, friend.
Yeah.
Like, that's not what the Lord calls us to. When we get into worship ministry, every time, like what was easy for us a year ago, or what was hard for us a year ago, should be really easy by now
Yeah.
if we're working at it. Like, we should be adding new things to our skills, new voicings, new rhythms, new whatever. Like, we need to keep growing, but that's not a because partly because of the culture of the church, and partly because the American culture in general is kind of consumeristic, and I can do what I want to do, and it's individualistic, and I don't really see that my lack of the way I'm stewarding it is really bringing us all down. So, number one challenge is, I don't even want what you do, what you're telling me to do. I don't even want to try it. Um, and I mean, this is related to that, but we'll often teach about identity, like outside of worship, music, skill. Like, so much is on the line for people when they're involved in worship ministry. There's the whole like artist, this is my thing, and but really what's going on is that, like, I'm trying to earn something here. And if you're saying that I'm not good enough to be here, or I'm not good enough in the way that I do things, you're not just saying, oh, I need to learn and grow my skill. You're saying I'm not a good person. And
Yeah.
so that identity piece, there's just so
Just
much on the line.
the American culture and constructive criticism is just uh butt
Yeah.
backwards. I mean, that's the only way I can think of. I mean, because it is. The reality is, you can't tell somebody, you know, this isn't working. We've got to step it up so that we can become. And even if you include the we can become, everybody gets offended and creates. It's all. I mean, we've gotten to become such a culture here in this country that is way backwards. I would want somebody to come to me and say, "Hey, when you did that song, here's something I would recommend that you try next time because notice this, or what have you." And it's funny because we were just shown this planning tool thing that they use at the church, and that you can upload the things from CCLI so that they can print them off, but then you can also upload the YouTube video for the version that you want to do, or whoever might like to do it. Like, for instance, I'm a Michael W. Smith fan. When it comes to, you are holy Prince of Peace, I am
Which is a
Michael W.
player.
Smith to the
That's
T.
right.
You know, and I do it like that, but you need to make sure that your instrumentalists get it, because some of them are like, I want to hear, I want to, and they'll just We have a bass player that just plays what he hears through here, and then he checks to see if he's got the music correct in the right key. But again, he does it to build the skill, so that when you come together, you've got that there. And if we need to make an adjustment, you say, hey, you know what? I like what you're doing there. That's just like the video or the track. That's really good. And I think that'll add. Could you also add this in with it? Those sorts of things again to build. And I don't know if well, it's definitely a cultural thing because I see it even in the workforce. I see people who get jobs and they why are you here? Why don't you do something instead of hold up a wall? You know,
Yeah.
it's just definitely a cultural thing. Yeah, that's just interesting. I wish
And
we could backtrack 20 years sometimes with when it comes to that.
yeah, well, people will hide behind the phrase, well, we're not professionals. No, it's like, did I, and I love when people say that because I'm like, can you unpack that for me? What does that mean to you? You mean you're not getting paid, so you're not going to try hard?
Yeah,
What does that actually mean? We're not professionals, so you're a volunteer. That means you can't be held to any standards. I don't understand. Like, it's okay that you just show up and give up your leftovers because you're not a professional priest in the Old Testament, and
yeah,
you know, like, what do you mean by that? Like,
yeah.
and it's just, and that's why we're just insecure, and
Hmm.
that's why like the focus has to be if we're going to coach people into something is like what would it take for you to be more comfortable?
Hmm. Yeah,
Wouldn't you love it to show up and be like, I got this?
yeah.
And that's just going to take some work.
Hmm.
And we're here to help you, walk alongside of you. We're not like evaluating and going, oh, these guys were just terrible. Like,
Yeah,
no, you're just not as far along. Like, you'll get there.
yeah, yeah.
So
What are a couple things that some positives that you've seen like over the years? Like you've gone in and I'm sure you've had, like you said, people are, I don't want you here. Thanks for coming. But what are some positives that you've seen over the years as you've worked with worship teams and you've kind of helped them again, first understand who they are as an individual so that then they can actually be an asset to the worship team and the worship experience in a church. What would some of those be?
yeah. Well, I mean, this as an educator, when you see the light bulb come on, and they're like, oh, is that how that works? Like, yes, I love it, man. You got it. You understood.
Yeah.
And those are things that they're going to take with them, forever. And whether it's like a musical thing or we see that sometime in the tech world, they're like, oh, I never understood what that whole thing was with compression or what I saw those low, medium, and highs, but I didn't know what that meant. And you've been running sound for 5 years, like, oh, I'm sorry. You know, um, for me, honestly, it's um, I love I love it when people are just figuring it out and learning and starting, and they're hungry. Those are like the hungry people. I love that, and they're taking notes. You're just talking and thinking about stuff, and they're like, oh, okay, yes, this makes sense, and like you can see the revelation that they're getting, and um, those are super fun moments. I'm trying to think if there's like a story. I mean, I know, like what, you know, um, when I've taught a retreat and taught a worship team on the five haters that I talked about earlier,
Hmm.
and you hear them just buzzing with each other, and finally understanding each other. What one of the things that one of the ways to learn to move your fader up and down, and this is super fascinating to me, is like, okay, let's say you're a priest, and priest is your highest fader. Okay, so and let's say it's when we go through the teaching, you'll figure out what's your highest and what's your lowest, because those are the most important things to start looking at. Because the highest is where you're going to say, am I healthy or unhealthy, and how can I be healthy? But the lowest is like, this needs some attention. You need to figure out how to get the rust off of this fader and move it again. So how do you do that? Well, if let's say if my artist fader is super low and my priest fader is super high, how do I grow? I want to go and talk to my teammate whose artist is the highest, and just say something like, "Can you tell me how you listen to this song? What do you do when you're like learning a song, that we're gonna do? It's a new song." And they'll start telling them, like, well, I listened to it a few times and just kind of get a vibe. And then I start listening in parts, in tracks. And they're like, what do you mean in tracks? Well, like, you take each instrument apart and say, okay, what's the bass guitar doing here? What's the first, second, third, and fourth electric guitars doing here? What's now, can I take the drums apart? What's the kick doing? Does the kick pattern change? What is it that makes this feel different going from the pre-chorus into the chorus? And I'll take about an hour just doing that, and I'll write a bunch of notes down on the page. And the priest is like, "You do what? Like, people, are you crazy? This is insane. Like, no, this is how you raise your artist freedom. You pay attention to how things work, the interplay, and you want to learn to take it apart, because we don't have all those parts on Sunday morning. We don't have the same players, so it's going to be different. But we have to know what the effect of each track is in the whole of the song."
Mm-hmm.
And so I just love hearing these conversations with a team, learning from each other in ways that they never thought was possible, which is, I love those. That's super
Yeah.
cool.
What now I mean I noticed you have worked across denominational lines. Um and I'm sure it's a little bit different to you would do some stuff probably a little bit differently to a Baptist church, or tier it a little differently maybe to a Baptist or Methodist church versus an Assembly of God church or Pentecostal church, or how do you do that? Because to me, there's certain theological debates that go on today. I'm not gonna fight them, because to me, in the eyes of Jesus Christ and Him crucified and the pillars of what we believe within our faith in Christendom, it's not worth you know losing a brother or sister, and having that friendship. But I'm assuming that when you like go into some of those places, like a Baptist, Southern Baptist, you probably, and being
I
with
speak in
with
tongues every chance I get.
that's
Not
what
really.
I was gonna say. I mean, I'm sure you keep that in mind, and but have you had any real challenges crossing denominational lines, or are you pretty much just, what, we're going to come in, this is where your church is at, we respect that, and we're going to give you what we can within those confined boundaries, or do you feel that they ask for the impossible?
Well, no, no. I mean, some of our MO is certainly major on the major and minor on the
Yeah,
minors, and I really mean that. Like, you just have to minor on the minors.
yeah.
Like, when they start talking about Jesus, wasn't the Christ, you
Then we got a
just go
problem.
ahead and raise your hand and walk out. But like, and also, like, we agree about so much more than what we disagree about, and
Hmm.
and because we're focused in music, that can be a common language, and we just look for commonalities and
Hmm.
and stay to the center with that.
Yeah.
You know, I don't. It's I have an article that I wrote for my coaches about keeping your something in check, like your, I forget what it's called. Um, like, we all have blind spots and we all have like things that we care about, but like, you just have to, gosh, I can't remember the word. That's irritating me. Well, whatever. Um, because the reality is, I
Well,
walk into a Presbyterian church, and I have certain home base things about my theology, about my belief about everything,
hmm.
and most of that's the same. And someone was like, "That's a little different," but I'm like, the thing that I love about the church is that when you see the different facets and all the, it's like a multi-sided thing, or like the elephant,
Hmm.
like the 9 squares with the elephant behind it, and everybody standing in one of the squares seeing part of the elephant.
Hmm.
Like, oh, this is what an elephant is. Like, well, yes, that is part of an elephant, but there's this, and there's this, and there's this, and
Hmm.
like, the Baptists get something that the Pentecostals don't. The Assemblies of God get something that the Presbyterians don't. Like, everybody gets something, that everybody has a gift, and
Yeah,
everybody
yeah.
has a shortcoming. So I'm like, let's celebrate that
Hmm. And
and
then,
just stay in the middle.
yeah, yeah,
Uh,
that's
so
great.
because, yeah, it's not redemptive to be like, well, why are you guys doing that?
Hmm. Yeah. Wow, that's I'll tell you, that's awesome. If you find that article, shoot it to me, and I'll
Yeah.
tag it at the bottom of one of my blogs that I've so poorly been doing with keeping up with. What happened was I started having blogs on my homepage, and uh, you get all these advertisements. So I would just go in, open them, and delete them. Well, I guess one
Oh,
of them that I opened and deleted was somebody who was able to get into the system and crash my whole website.
oh
So
no.
I don't even touch the blog on my website. I have a whole nother blog site that I go to, and I started posting the hymn stuff that I started writing, but I've just been so busy I haven't had a chance. But I think this is good. I think one of the things that is challenging is in worship is kind of finding that happy medium to where you start. Like
Mm.
we've gone in and we've worked with churches over the years, and the first thing that goes up is, okay, the big change word, what's changing, and trying to encourage people that as a worship team, you're a family. We're your family, like you said. Shepherding is one of those things, and as a worship leader, you should be able, it sounds to me, be able to be every part of those faders. Somewhere in there, you are
Yeah.
an artist, shepherd, priest, educator, and producer, and you just need to know which one or ones you need to turn up at this time and which ones you need to turn down at this time, because the greater good is is the whole body that's there. You're coming together as a worship team as to really usher people in worship, to have them experience something authentic that really you just can't do sitting at home just reading your Bible or sitting at home and playing a worship song on a CD. It's the corporate, the kind of the mystery of the corporate worship that takes place. One of the many mysteries we have about God, and there's just something dynamic and different when we come together. And then when you come together with the same mind, that it's not about the team, it's not about me leading the worship, it's not about you playing the beautiful music on the flute. It's about the people connecting to the God of this universe and offering themselves to him as their worship. Like, if
Yeah.
we could grasp that, I think 90% of um, challenges that I think worship leaders would face, like if worship team members would just grasp that, I think it would make worship leaders' jobs 10 times better, because everybody gets so focused on this. I'm part of it. I do this. I've been doing this for 15 years. We lose sight of the whole purpose of why we were even
Yeah.
on a worship team. And, it breaks my heart because people, storm off because they don't like change. People, and it might just be, hey, why don't you try playing this on the drum this time? Who are you to tell me? And they leave. They never come back. But the issue isn't with the worship leader at that point necessarily, unless it was, well, I don't want you, the issue seems to be the heart of the member. And if we can get the heart of the member in line with the grander purpose of what worship is as a whole for a corporate body, and we do that,
Yeah.
I think most of our challenges with the constructive criticism, the well, I do it this way, and I think most of that would probably be lifted if I'm not mistaken. When you think about that, because we lose our focus on worship. We just want to sound like the church down the street. We want to sound like the recording that we have of this song, which is good, but you want to make sure that you, like you said, you're not Carrie Joe. You're not Hezekiah Walker. So there's different. They're flowing in a different gifting, and being utilized in what God has called them to do in that gifting. And you don't need to copy that. You need to become you, so that you can hit the big grand picture of bringing everybody into that presence. And am I missing it? Am I kind of hitting that on the head?
Yeah, yeah, for sure. I mean, I stole from Dan Wilt because he says that we are creating spaces where people can meet with God.
Yeah.
I love that because creating a space that's welcoming and inviting, where people can actually meet with God,
Mhm.
connect with God. Like, so what does that space look like? Well, how does the music influence the welcomeness of that space? What I say, the volume that we do it at, the songs that we choose, the scriptures I read, to bring us into, like, everything affects how welcome they feel in that space that was created specifically for meeting with God.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And that is the, who cares about what I want? What do we need?
Yeah.
How can we serve our church to make that space something that they're going to be like, oh, I met with God. Awesome. You sounded good. Oh, thanks. What do I care?
Yeah.
Like, that wasn't. So
Yeah.
absolutely,
Yeah.
you're right on.
Right. Cool. Well, Dave, it was great talking about, what God has been doing in and through you and with Ad Lib music. And if people who are listening to this want to get a hold of you, how would they be able to do that?
So adlibmusic.com is our website.
Mhm.
Sure there'll be a link to that in the
Great.
in the notes,
Great.
description. The one thing that I always want to plant this seed, because we've been in Costa Rica for almost 5 years now. And one of the things that we're doing is inviting worship teams to come on mission trips. So imagine if you've ever been on a mission trip and what it did for that team that you were with. Imagine that feeling of camaraderie, that expanded worldview, that just seeing what God is doing outside of the bubble of the U.S. But on your worship team, doing that together as a worship team would be super, super powerful.
Wow.
So I always want to invite people, go get your passport
Come
so
down to
that
Costa Rica and let's hang out.
when the time is right, come to Costa Rica. You can, if you come with nothing but a backpack, you can come from Baltimore to San Jose for $195
That's
on
not bad.
Spirit.
Wow.
So it's not
Yeah.
like $1,000 to fly. So
Just
it's,
got to get into Baltimore nowadays because that one bridge is down.
oh yeah,
But yeah,
that was great.
oh my. Well,
Yes.
it was nice to have you on the show, Dave.
Thanks, man.
Hopefully this was, I mean, I know it was encouraging to me. And it's been a while since we've connected, and I'm so excited about what God is doing in and through Ad Lib Music. I'm your host, Mike Beckett, for the Dead Prophet here. We'll see you next time on the show. Have a great day. Bye-bye.